If you have already watched this introductory information, you can skip ahead no more than 16 minutes. Hello, welcome. I am predicting that famous singer-songwriter Paul Simon of the famous music duo Simon and Garfunkel will slip and fall to the ground on August 30th and then die as a result of his injuries on August 31st, 2025. This time-stamped email proves that this prediction that Paul Simon will die on August 1st, 2025 has been known since November 9th. We can see here the timestamp November 9th, 2024. On November 8th, 2024, we received the relevant prophetic signs related to Paul Simon. And as I wrote right here, God was pointing to November 8th ahead of time because Simon's death will point to Revelation chapter 8, verse 1. And this is the reason why Paul Simon will die on August 1st, 2025. In short, the date 8:1 and 11:8 hint at Revelation 8:1 in the Bible, which describes a period of silence that was observed in heaven. Paul Simon's first hit was Sound of Silence. As I wrote right here, it is exactly 38 weeks between November 8th and August 1st, 2025, and Paul Simon is predicted to die at the age of 83, for which 38 weeks hints at. All right, the analysis that God was pointing to August 1st was 100% correct. However, Paul Simon did not die on August 1st. Instead, God provided clear and relevant signs related to Paul Simon, which revealed adding 7 more days to reach August 8th. The sign we received was the news report, the breaking of the news of the sale of the storied mansion in Los Angeles that was built for the most prolific TV producer in history, Aaron Spelling, and God uses extremes and records for his signs, who produced the longest-running drama series in history, Seventh Heaven. That's how we get the addition of 7 days to reach August 8th. And Simon is associated with mansions, or I should say in God's signs, mansion theme and symbolism is related to Paul Simon because his biggest solo album was the Graceland album, and the song Graceland is about Elvis Presley's mansion. There's lots to that for why God is using this theme, but this is immediately recognized. I've been following Paul Simon's signs for years now, and I've known about this theme of mansion symbolism for over 3 years. And so that's why it was immediately recognized that this sign involving the sale of this mansion, and one of the big signs is the sale of Paul Simon's mansion. It's not only a mansion sign on August 1st that we received, but the story was the sale of the mansion. And that's again because one of the signs is the sale of Paul Simon's mansion back on July 1st, 2022. And that the details of that prophetic sign are explained elsewhere. Now, another thing about the 7 days connection is Paul Simon at this time on August 1st he still is, but he won't be by the date of August 8th, touring for his new album, 7 Psalms. Okay, so just to review so far, we had God pointing to August 1st ahead of time, the date 8:1, because it describes in Revelation 8:1 a period of silence in heaven, and silence, the sound of silence is Paul Simon's first big hit that launched his career. On that day, we received the relevant clear sign, which was the sale of the mansion of the most prolific TV producer who produced the longest drama series in history, Seventh Heaven. Paul Simon's best-selling album was Graceland, and it was his 7th solo album, and this 7th album of Paul Simon's is named Graceland, which is named after a mansion, Elvis Presley's mansion. One of the songs that was one of Paul Simon's big hits on the Graceland album is the song The Boy in the Bubble, which was inspired by the TV movie that was produced by Aaron Spelling, The Boy in the Plastic Bubble. Currently, or at the time of August 1st, Paul Simon was touring for his Seven Psalms album. The seventh heaven sign, in other words, of this, that's derived from this sale of this mansion that belonged to the TV producer that produced Seventh Heaven, indicates revealed adding 7 days. There's more confirmation for the fact that God was pointing to August 8th, far more. However, for the sake of simplicity in discussing this here, we received the prophetic sign on August 1st to add 7 days. Now, on August 8th, we received another prophetic, clear, relevant sign regarding Paul Simon, which was the news about the Royal Caribbean cruise ship. And God uses records and extremes for signs, and this is the world's largest cruise ship that this incident occurred on, which was the glass part of the water slide breaking, busting through, causing the person that was sliding to become seriously injured. And this was a Slip Slidin Away sign, one of Simon's big hits, Slip Slidin Away, which comes from the album Greatest Hits, Etc., which was released in 1977. And so that's more confirmation for the prior 7 days connection from August 1st. There was another Slip Slidin Away sign on August 8th, which was the NASCAR driver who slipped on top of his car after he was in the victory lane celebrating and seriously injured himself. He broke his collarbone. That was another Slip Slidin Away sign on August 8th. And this NASCAR driver that slipped from the roof of his car in the victory lane as he celebrated drives car number 88. And this Slip Sliding Away sign occurred on the date 8/8, August 8th. Now, the reason for this Slip Sliding Away cruise ship sign on August 8th is because Revelation chapter 8, verse 8 describes ships. And it is a long story to explain, but the ships described in Revelation chapter 8, verse 8, which is what the date 8/8 hints at with this ship sign, is symbolism for America. The ships are symbolism for America, and that's because of Isaiah chapter 23, which is about America. For those that say America isn't in Bible prophecy, it isn't correct. And the daughter of Tarshish is America in the book of Isaiah chapter 23, and Tarshish is the UK. And so the ships of Tarshish, and therefore the ships of the daughter of Tarshish, are the naval power of the UK and America, which gave these nations supremacy militarily in the world during the 19th and 20th centuries. The point is that this reveals adding 23 days to August 8th to get the date it is predicted that Paul Simon will die on August 31st. Again, because the Slip Slidin Away sign on the cruise ship, the broken slide, points to the ships in Revelation 8:8 because it occurred on the date 8/8. And we know that the ships in Revelation 8:8 symbolize America because of Isaiah chapter 23. That's why we know to add 23 days. There are many more profound reasons for knowing that Paul Simon will die on August 31st, but that's enough for this explanation here that gets us from August 1st to August 31st. It is now recognized that Paul Simon will slip and fall on August 30th, and then die the next day on August 31st as a result of his injuries. What this means is that it is irrelevant what Paul Simon's current state of health is, and there is zero news in the media regarding Paul Simon's state of health. But it is irrelevant anyway, because although I am predicting the death of an old man, it is predicted that he will die as a result of his injuries from slipping and falling the day before he's predicted to die. He's predicted to die on August 31st, but he's predicted to slip and fall to the ground on August 30th. Now, the reason for going into all of this is because it needs to be explained that in reality, or rather essentially, I predicted that Paul Simon would die on August 31st back in November of 2024. Because again, as I explained here, in this email that was written on November 9th, 2024, God was pointing to August 1st, 2025 for Paul Simon's death because of Revelation 8:1, as I explained. And I just now explained the trail of signs that led from August 1st to August 8th to August 31st. And those signs were revealed through knowing August 1st ahead of time. Therefore, essentially, if you are reasonable and you have the eyes to see, I predicted that Paul Simon would die on August 31st back in November of 2024. The reasonable person will recognize that this is true. One last thing to mention here, to make clear, is that back in November of 2024, I predicted that Paul Simon would die in the month of August, because August is the 8th month of the year. And again, Paul Simon's death will point to Revelation chapter 8, which describes a period of silence in heaven, and Paul Simon's first big hit that launched his career was Sound of Silence. But more than that, Paul Simon's precise date is also being predicted. It isn't only that it is predicted that he will die in the 8th month of the year, but specifically August 31st. I am not as confident in these next two predictions number 2 and 3, but it seems that it is possible that dirty bombs will explode in New York City and Los Angeles on September 4th, 2025. There will be a large-scale evacuation from Manhattan Island. This is going to happen. It's just a question of whether this will occur on September 4th. One of the dirty bombs will explode in Penn Station, and another of the dirty bombs will explode in the port of Los Angeles. I am also not confident in prediction number 3, which is that Tehran in Iran and or Damascus in Syria will be nuked. Again, this will happen. It's just a question of whether or not this will occur on September 7th. I am predicting that Kamala Harris and Gavin Newsom will die in a plane crash in St. Louis as they are traveling from Washington, D.C. to Los Angeles in Busch Stadium in St. Louis on August 2nd, 2028. This will be during the predicted presidential campaign of Gavin Newsom. As a result of Gavin Newsom's death, Michelle Obama will become the Democrat Party's presidential nomination. Michelle Obama will, quote unquote, win the election over J.D. Vance on November 7th, 2028, and will become the president on January 20th, 2029. Donald Trump is predicted to run as J.D. Vance's vice president. This scheme to overcome the 22nd Amendment will backfire and inspire Michelle Obama and Barack Obama to run on the ticket with Barack Obama as Michelle Obama's vice president. She will then step down and Barack Obama will become the president again. It is predicted that there will be a massive Mary apparition on the beach in Rio, Brazil on April 24th, 2029. It is now recognized that there will be 2 massive Mary apparitions on the beach in Rio. The first of the 2 is predicted to be on March 22nd, 2029. These predicted Mary apparitions will not be secretive. They will be mainstream, worldwide news. Like all Mary apparitions in history, including at Lourdes, Guadalupe, and Fatima, this Mary apparition will be a demon pretending to be Mary. It is predicted that on April 26th, 2029, the key will open the bottomless pit and fallen angels will cross over into the earthly realm. April 26th, 2029 will be a symbolic beginning to the 5th trumpet judgment that is described in Revelation chapter 9, when the demonic realm collides with the earthly realm. April 26th, 2029 will be a symbolic beginning to demons pretending to be aliens. The demons pretending to be aliens will claim to be here to help us with our nuclear weapons. It is predicted that Pope Francis will be resurrected from the grave on April 26th, 2029, and it is possible that on this day, Pope Francis will announce that aliens have arrived and have made him the ambassador for the world. This will immediately give Pope Francis, the Antichrist, supreme power over governments of the world. April 26th, 2029 will be a symbolic beginning to a zombie pandemic and the masses becoming demonically possessed that will be facilitated through the thing, which is the mark of the Antichrist and 5G frequencies. April 26th, 2029 will be a symbolic beginning to the coming genocide politicide in America. The resurrection rapture event will occur on Pentecost on May 27th, 2029. On September 11th, 2029, there will be a catastrophic asteroid hit of Earth in the Indian Ocean. The greatest seismic effect of this will be felt on the other side of the globe, which is North America, and this will trigger an eruption of Yellowstone volcano and will cause the volcano in the Canary Islands to collapse into the Atlantic Ocean and send a mega tsunami towards the East Coast. It will also trigger the collapse of the Hoover Dam, which will cause a water panic in California, and many other devastating earthquakes. The day of the Lord, the second coming of Lord Jesus Christ, Judgment Day, will be at the end of 2031. The date that this video is posted proves that these predictions are being made ahead of time, as do these time-stamped emails and forensic notes PDF documents. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward these to you. All right, welcome. This video is predicting that famous singer-songwriter Paul Simon of Simon and Garfunkel will die on August 31st, 2025. This video, however, was produced prior to it being learned the way in which Paul Simon will die. It is now recognized through God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel, that Paul Simon will first slip and fall on August 30th, and then, as a result of his injuries, will die on August 31st. Paul Simon has a big hit, a hit song, Slip Slidin Away. And this is one way in which God, or through this song and many other prophetic signs, God is communicating that Paul Simon will slip and fall on August 30th and then die the following day. Currently, there is no news of Paul Simon's health. Absolutely no news of Paul Simon's health is in the media. Furthermore, he recently finished a concert tour on August 6th. So as of August 6th, he was healthy enough to perform at concerts. But given now that we know he will die from falling, his health, his state of health, would be irrelevant anyway. So it'd be one thing to predict the death of an old man. He is 83. That said, he could live another 7 years. There's no way to really know that he will die on August 31st because there's no news of his personal health. But more than that, he is predicted to die from falling and suffering from the injuries. And that cannot be known ahead of time. There's no prior warning or heads up, such as a person's health or state of health. Again, just to be clear, Paul Simon is predicted to die on August 31st, yes, and he is old, yes, but he is predicted to die from falling. And that date is known also to be August 30th, which is after today's date. The post date of the video you are watching on the social media platform proves that this video was posted prior to August 30th. And of course, there's no humanly way possible that I could know that Paul Simon will slip and fall on August 30th and then die the following day. In other words, when this prediction comes to pass, it'll prove everything that I say in this video, and that's the purpose of this prediction that is from God. And it is also, of course, to prove that the righteous Christian God of the Bible is the true God. All right, now, this particular video that you are watching was produced prior to August 19th, 2025. God overwhelmingly pointed to the date August 19th regarding Paul Simon, and because of that, it was assumed that this would be the day that he would fall and that he would die 12 days later on August 31st. What happened is that August 19th ended up being another step in the trail of signs, and this is how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works, which is only being explained on this channel. It works in principle on trails of signs. The full intended meaning of any of God's prophetic signs cannot be properly or fully understood without their context and connections to the other prophetic signs, something that other sign watchers don't fully appreciate. And it is through these interconnected signs that God is able to tell stories, and it is through these stories and themes that God is able to communicate extremely important and essential knowledge that everyone needs to know, which is why all of the videos must be watched. And so what happened on August 19th was we received another clear, relevant Paul Simon sign, which would have been expected had it not been the day he would fall. We would expect that he would fall or another clear, relevant sign. Now, the sign we received on this day overlapped another thing that God is communicating, which is the prediction for the explosion of dirty bombs in New York City and Los Angeles. Now, what happened was on this day, Walmart recalled a lot of their shrimp from the Great Value line of shrimp, frozen shrimp. It's a long story. I explained it in another video, but long story short, it's one of these many boat ship signs that God has been communicating in relation to Paul Simon during this month of August, as explained in other videos. And so the shrimp come from a shrimp boat from Indonesia, and that's prophetic for a reason, which is explained in the other videos, in particular, this particular sign. But this all points back to the movie Forrest Gump. A big part of the plot is a shrimp boat, a shrimping boat. And the reason for Forrest Gump is that Forrest Gump is known for its soundtrack, as is Paul Simon and Art Garfunkel known for a soundtrack to a movie, Mrs. Robinson. The song Mrs. Robinson appears on the Forrest Gump soundtrack. In fact, one of the iconic scenes in the movie of Forrest Gump running across the country, across America, is it appears when this song is played, Mrs. Robinson. Simon and Garfunkel are also known for a song named America, which is also about traveling across America. The famous Forrest Gump soundtrack sold over 12 million copies. And that is 3 times 4 million copies, and Paul Simon is being associated with the Hebrew idiom for 3 transgressions and for 4 in God's signs. That's why, for example, the first Simon and Garfunkel album was titled Wednesday Morning, 3 a.m. Wednesday's the 4th day of the week. Okay, so also 12 because God is using Paul Simon for symbolism for Revelation chapter 12. Another story that's explained in other videos. Anyway, August 19th plus 12 days is the date it is predicted that Paul Simon will die. And so that's how this particular prophetic sign, and the shrimp is being recalled due to radioactive contaminants in the shrimp, which hints at the coming evacuations due to the radioactive contamination in New York City and the port of Los Angeles. Okay, which, by the way, will be 4 times 4 days later. And, anyway, I've explained in other videos how the number 4 is supremely relevant to Paul Simon, including, for example, pointing to the idiom that I just mentioned for 3 transgressions and for 4. Now, as you watch the rest of this video, keep in mind that, again, this video was made prior to August 19th. We received the prophetic sign that confirmed all of the analysis. And so therefore, all of the analysis is 100% correct. It just wasn't the day that Paul Simon was going to fall. It was a date for another prophetic Paul Simon related sign, which I just touched upon. I didn't really explain. But anyway, again, it also reveals that he'll die 12 days later. So, for example, when I talk about in the rest of this video, the date 8/19 and the day Paul Simon will fall, keep in mind that it's just part of the trail of signs, and it was completely relevant, the analysis that you'll be hearing. And so therefore you need to learn this analysis because God provided this analysis for you so that you could pick up on what God is communicating through his big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which, like I said, tells these stories that you need to know. Hello, welcome. This video is predicting that famous singer-songwriter Paul Simon of the famous duo Simon and Garfunkel will slip and fall on August 19th, 2025. He will then die. It is predicted that he will then die on August 30th, 2025. And it is predicted that the first news of his death will be on the 31st, the day after. Okay, so this is what is predicted here. God has been using Paul Simon in his big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, his true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel. He has been using Paul Simon for many years. This is what it is believed to be how this will unfold. What I mean is God has also been using Paul Simon not only for prophetic signs, but ultimately for the timing of his death. The timing of his death in the 8th month, the month of August, for example, will point to the book of Revelation, chapter 8. The first verse of this chapter 8 describes a period of silence in heaven. And Paul Simon's first big hit that launched his career is Sound of Silence. This sound of silence that was heard, or rather observed in heaven in the beginning of Revelation chapter 8 is a warning which is followed by the 7 trumpets of judgment from God, which is incidentally for the reason for a number of things, including Paul Simon's best-selling album, his 7th solo album, Graceland, and also his recent newest album, 7 Psalms. He is also known for his big hit, Late in the Evening, a name which in itself hints at time is running out for judgment and destruction from God, a warning. And this song is known for its heavy use of trumpets. So again, he also has a big hit, Slip Slidin Away, which incidentally was released in 1977. And that's part of the reason for how it is believed that Paul Simon will first slip and fall on August 19th and then die on August 30th or 31st, or basically both if he dies on the 30th, and the news of the death is not reported until the 31st. All right, now having said this, like I've said, the knowledge that God is using Paul Simon and the timing of his death has been known for years. Regarding the specific date, though, that is predicted here, the post date of the video that you are watching this on the social media platform that you are watching it on proves this prediction is being made ahead of time. You are watching this prior to August 19th. Furthermore, this time-stamped email proves that this prediction was made at least on August 15th, prior to August 19th. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I'll forward this to you. Now that said, there will be, of course, the skeptic that will say, well, I must have made a video or had reasons for every day of the year hoping that finally I would get it right and that Paul Simon would finally die on the date. That is not even absurd. That is crazy. And only a crazy person would do that. And so to think that someone would do that makes that person the crazy person, the completely irrational person. Paul Simon, for that matter, could live another 7 years. He's only 83, if you will. And there is zero news of his health in the news right now. Furthermore, he just finished a tour He was just, on August 6th, he finished his recent tour that began in April. So he was healthy enough to perform at concerts, in other words. There was 1 day or two that he missed during the tour due to his bad back. But I'm not aware of anyone dying due to a bad back. Okay, so in other words, there is zero news of Paul Simon's health. There is no reason to believe that this date is going to be the date he will die, because he could live for years. And why would someone make up videos and reasons for how that date is known for every day? That's crazy. Okay, so just think about it, right? Just be a little bit more reasonable if that is you, if what I'm describing is you. And there is a good chance that it does describe you, because the truth is, humans aren't rational by nature. And that includes the conclusion by many people that there is no God or there is no evidence for God. The belief that there is no evidence for God is the core belief of the religion of agnostic atheism, because every worldview is a religion, and so is that religion or worldview. And the core belief, and every religion has a core belief, and the core belief of that particular religion is that there is no evidence for God, which is a lie. There is an overwhelming amount of evidence, not only prophecy, scientific evidence even, etc. However, that's another subject. The truth is that there are people that choose the irrational conclusion that there is no God and there's no evidence for God based on their desire that there not be a God, that they are accountable to for their sin, that is. In other words, the righteous Christian God of the Bible is offensive to most people for a reason. Jesus said, for example, "Blessed is he who is not offended by me." And many, many people are offended by Christ, and Christianity is by far the most offensive religion on earth. That's why people hate it in the West, for example. And so, anyway, the point I'm trying to make here is that let's think about this more reasonably. I'm definitely documenting this prediction as being made ahead of time. Now, what I'm about to do is read the profound reasons for how I know about August 19th and August 30th and 31st. And as you will see, these reasons could not be concocted in the imagination of a human being. No one is creative enough to come up with these reasons, let alone for multiple dates. In other words, you will clearly see that the reasons that I will be providing here are from God. But, of course, the prediction when it comes to pass will also prove this. And on that note, when the prediction comes to pass, it'll prove the things that I am saying. It'll prove the reasons and the things contained in the reasons. And that is the purpose for the prediction. The purpose of this prediction that is from God, and I know far better than anyone the reason and purpose for this prediction, is to prove the controversial things that I'll be saying in these videos. And when the prediction comes to pass, the wise person will recognize that they need to watch every minute of every video on this channel. Okay, now let's just get into it. This email is documenting the prediction that singer-songwriter Paul Simon of Simon and Garfunkel will slip and fall on August 19th, 2025, and then die on August 30th. The news of his death will is predicted to first be reported on August 31st. Paul Simon has a big hit, Slip Slidin Away. Simon is predicted to slip and fall on August 19th and then die on August 30th or 31st, or the news of his death being reported on the 31st as a result of the fall. All right, now, arguably, the most important thing, the most profound reason why God is using Paul Simon has just been learned. Again, Paul Simon's career began with his song Sound of Silence. And in Revelation chapter 8 begins with the period of sound of silence in heaven, which was a warning before the trumpet judgments. Paul Simon is 9/11 symbolism. Paul Simon performed in the first Saturday Night Live broadcast after 9/11 And he also performed at the 10th anniversary ceremony at the 9/11 Memorial in Manhattan. Furthermore, Paul Simon is known for being from New York City. Paul Simon is 9/11 symbolism. Also, what was just recently learned also is that the crash of Flight 587, just 2 months after 9/11, into Queens, New York, in a residential neighborhood, also was a Paul Simon sign. Paul Simon is from Queens, New York. So Paul Simon, in other words, in God's signs here, is symbolism for 9/11. Now, as it will be explained over and over again in these Paul Simon videos, God is associating the number 4 with Paul Simon. And I'll explain the other reasons, but I'll have to just briefly explain one of the reasons that's already been explained, just briefly again, which is that, and I'll explain elsewhere how this works, but God is using the Hebrew idiom, and Paul Simon is Jewish, in the book of Amos, chapter 1, which is a repeating Hebrew idiom that means, or the idiom is, for 3 transgressions and for 4. The meaning of this idiom, this Hebrew idiom, is the tolerable limit of transgressions has been exceeded, and now judgment and destruction is unavoidable. Okay, so again, Paul Simon is symbolism for 9/11. The timing of his death will be symbolism for the warning before the judgment because of the sound of silence in Revelation chapter 8. And also, Paul Simon is pointing to, and it's explained elsewhere, the Hebrew idiom for 3 transgressions and for 4. Well, Paul Simon's 4th album with Columbia Records and final album with Columbia Records was the album on which Slip Slidin Away was released. Okay? His 4th album with Garfunkel, the 4th Simon and Garfunkel album, was Bookends. And it occurred to me that Paul Simon is a bookend. And then after that thought, I recalled that there is an album named Bookends. That's because Paul Simon is the bookend to the period of opportunity for America. And Paul Simon also symbolizes America, which is explained elsewhere, but also he has a hit song, America, which comes from the album Bookends. The timing of Paul Simon's death will conclude, bookend, a period of opportunity and grace for America to repent and turn back to God after the warning that was the 9/11 events. This is so profound. So hopefully that's appreciated also through the Hebrew idiom for 3 transgressions and for 4. We have the 4th album, Bookends, and also the 4th solo album, which released Slip Slidin Away. In other words, the opportunity to repent and come back to God before judgment and destruction of the nation has been slip sliding away, and will conclude with the death of Paul Simon, which will symbolize the warning prior to the judgment, the period of silence in heaven. God is using Paul Simon and the agent who first signed him, Wally Amos of famous Amos Cookies, who founded the famous Amos Cookies company, to point to the Hebrew idiom that is repeated in Amos chapter 1, which has 15 verses. Let's just pause here and talk about Wally Amos. He founded famous Amos Cookies, and he was the agent that first signed Simon and Garfunkel through luring them into his office with cookies. Wally Amos died at the age of 88 on the prophetic Hebrew calendar date, which is another story explained in other videos. And that served to point to the book of Amos, chapter 8, which begins with a description of a basket of summer fruit, which points to the month of August, in which baskets of summer fruit appear. And again, Paul Simon will die in the month of August because of the first verse in Revelation chapter 8, which regards the sound of silence in heaven. Okay, but also God is pointing to the first chapter of the book of Amos through Wally Amos and through Paul Simon. And that chapter again has chapter 1 has 15 verses. And that's why Paul Simon had his prophetic dream in which a voice instructed him to produce his recent 7 Psalms album on the date 1/15, January 15th in 2019, which hints at Amos 1 with its 15 verses. The Hebrew idiom that is repeated in the 15 verses of Amos is, quote, "for 3 transgressions and for 4, which means the tolerable limit of transgressions has been exceeded, and now judgment and destruction are unavoidable. Simon and Garfunkel's first album, after famous Amos signed them, was Wednesday morning, 3 a.m. Wednesday is the 4th day of the week, which gives us the 3 and the 4 here. This hints at the Hebrew idiom for 3 transgressions and for 4. The prophetic dream on the date 1/15 is exactly 344 weeks before Simon is predicted to slip and fall on August 19th. So this 344 weeks hints at this Hebrew idiom that God is using Paul Simon for 3 transgressions and for 4.